We Get Outdoors Tribe, it's an honor tonight to introduce you all to Hannah Finchamp. For those of you who have heard of Hannah, I don't need to say anything more. But for those of you who haven't, she's one of the USA's Olympic long sort of mountain biking team group of females who hopefully she'll get the chance to go to the Olympics in 2021 now. She's sponsored by the Orange Seal brand in their off-road team and has, by looking at your CV, Hannah, you've tried a bit of everything when it comes to sport, from running to cycling to swimming to everything. So, Hannah, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
It's super cool. Now, I just want to start off with the obvious of why cycling. You've done so many things. Why cycling?
Yeah, it was a very unique journey to cycling for me. I started in more traditional sport of soccer when I was very, very young. And at the age of 9, I said, I never really get tired on the field. I want to try a running race. I think I could do really well at a running race. And so I went to a running race, and at the running race, there was a booth advertising triathlon. And I pointed at that booth and I said, as a 9-year-old, that's what I want to do. And so, my parents signed me up for a little camp to how to do a triathlon. I started triathlon, and for the next 10 years of my life, I raced as a triathlete. I went on to win the overall Xterra Amateur World Championship 2 times. And after I won the first time, someone I really looked up to was standing at the finish line, Shawnee Van Landingham, which is a very well-decorated mountain biker. She turned to me and she said, "My managers would like to speak to you." And that was how I joined the then Luna Pro team. And I joined as a triathlete because they had a triathlon program back then. And a few years into that program, they said, "We're discontinuing the triathlon program, but you're still so young." I was 20 or 21 at the time. So you're still so young that if you would like to continue with us and try to transition into mountain biking, we will support you. And so I took the leap, and here we are a few years later, and I'm all in, and I'm so thankful for that opportunity.
That's super cool. That's quite a big leap to go from what I guess was road cycling, skinny tires and all that stuff, into wider tires, downhill, jumps, drops offs, trees, rocks. How have you found that transition?
Yeah, so I did all kinds of triathlon. I did ITU draft legal, I did non-draft legal, and I also did Xterra, which was the off-road triathlon. So I did ride mountain bikes to do that. And as a part of training for that, I did the high school mountain bike league. And so I had raced mountain bikes. So I thought, it couldn't be that big of a transition. It certainly was. It was massive. I mean, there's such a variety of mountain biking, and that's one of the things that I love about the sport, is that we can all enjoy it, whether it's going along a wide dirt road or whether it's doing some of these insanely gnarly World Cup courses. And when I made the transition, that was the first time that I learned that there were such huge differences in types of mountain biking. So it was a huge transition, but I've always loved a challenge, and that's what it became for me was, okay, this is where I am. This is what I've committed to. You can overcome this. And so it became this huge challenge, and I've just continued to view it that way through my whole career.
What's been the easiest bit in that challenge for you to transition across?
Oh man, that's a tough question. I would say, the first thing that comes to mind, kind of an abstract answer to that, but the first thing that comes to mind is people always ask me, how did you deal with the disappointment? And by that, I mean, I went from being, a world champion in one sport to being lapped in a race in another sport.
I'm sorry, I'm not laughing at you.
No, it's true. It's comical. I went from being one of the best to being the last person called up on the start line. And a lot of people ask, how do you deal with that? How did that feel? Were you disappointed? Like, how did you overcome that? And that was the easiest part for me, was overcoming that. I never once felt disappointed or discouraged because of my placement, because for me, winning was always about progress. So placing 30th and then placing 25th, people would wonder why I was jumping up and down at the finish line, but for me, that was a win. And I feel like I've spent my entire career celebrating victory because of that, whether or not I was actually winning.
There's a very famous Scottish athletics coach who talks of his a journey with a young female athlete that he worked with, who begged him to coach her. And he did. And then she was crying after a second race because she come in last again. And he's like, but you won. Like, your last race, you did this in 20 point something seconds. And this race, you've done it in 19 point something seconds. You're like 5% better than you were in your last race. You've actually won. And and he argues on some of the courses he offers that the scoreboard and the medals and the placing are all incorrect indicators as to how good somebody is. It's actually what's that trajectory they're on, like what's their incremental gain every year. And if you focus on celebrating that, you're always a winner.
Absolutely. And that's how I felt through this whole pandemic as well. When racing was stripped off the table, I think it can be very difficult to maintain your motivation, but the cool thing is I can still race myself every single day. And the technology that we have allows for those objective measurements where I can still tick off the improvement. And so I'm still celebrating.
That's awesome. Tell me, how have you been using this lockdown, social distancing, pandemic time to your own advantage?
Yeah, I think, for me, this has been a really great opportunity to improve, to work on some of those things that I maybe wouldn't have time to work on otherwise. We spend so much time traveling and racing that we have to spend a lot of time resting as well in order to prepare for those races. And because there's no races, the training has just been kind of off the charts. I've trained a lot more this year already, comparatively, like where I would normally be in July than I normally do. So for me, it's a great opportunity to make those improvements. And like you said, I'm on the Olympic long team. So that means I'm one of 6 women who are hoping to go to Tokyo next year. The US has 3 spots. So there's 6 of us in contention for those 3 spots. And I would not call myself a favorite for them, especially had that taken place this year. But given another year, and as you just spoke of, my trajectory has been great. And I feel really confident and really excited about the improvement I'm making. So in some ways, I think that this year played to my advantage for my chances of making it to Tokyo.
Because it's a double competition. The first competition is to get selected, and then the next competition is to get a medal, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
So in knowing the other 5 females in the long team, what is it that you need to most focus on to best put yourself in a position to go and get one of those 3 spots?
Yeah, I think that is a great question, because there are so many ways that I could answer that. I think, a lot of them have experience that I don't have. They've either been to the Olympics multiple times, or have been on the long team before. So just in terms of experience, I'm greatly lacking. So I think any opportunities that I have for more experience help to boost my ability to get on that team. And with that, just every step that I can make forward is a step that I can start further up on the start line. So to keep it simple, I think the starts are a really huge factor for me, because when you start in a mountain bike race, for anyone who doesn't know, it's, potentially 80 to 100 women all starting at once as a mass start, and there's maybe 1 to 3 minutes before you hit single track. So if you're not in that first 10, you're standing in a bottleneck. So for me, a huge focus right now is what can I do to make it up into that first 10, or, within that range, to be within striking distance as the laps tick by.
And do you all start on a straight line, or is it more like a marathon start where it's a pack of you who you're all like jostling to get to where the tape is at the front and that sort of thing? How does that work?
They call us up based on ranking points. So that's another factor is gaining lots of points in order to be further up in the start grid. And there's 8 women per line. So 8, 8, 8 all the way back. So you could end up being 8th row if you're, being called up in the 60s.
And forgive my ignorance, but like, how far back can you be and still get a medal? I suppose that's a very interesting thought.
It's really, really tough. So at the World Championships this last year, I'm just going to lay it out there. At the World Championships this last year, I was called up, I believe, somewhere between, let's just go around 58th, somewhere around there. So I was in the 7th row. And I finished, so I was called up 58th and I finished 26th, which was considered a huge jump. But I stood at that first single track, standing still, waiting to try and get in. So the leader's minutes up the trail by the time I even get in. So that's where that's where the start becomes really, really important, because it does leave you with what ifs of, if I was able to pass 25 people within that race, what if I had started those 25 spots closer up?
What if? So there's many factors. There's getting your ranking up there. There's getting select. So there's almost the bit before Tokyo is the most important bit, because that's the bit that will decide the outcome of Tokyo.
Yes. Yeah. There's a lot that plays into it. And that's why so many people say, the Olympics is one race and your career leads up to it. It's 4 years truly, if not more, of preparation. So really, I think the opening ceremonies were supposed to be today. So we have 1 year. So really we're kind of in the sprint now to make it all happen. And it's exciting. And I'm hopeful that we can get back to racing safely come early winter, or late winter, early spring, and we can start fighting for those points and moving forwards towards those big qualification races come May.
I suppose at least everybody is in the same situation that you are. Everybody is struggling to get enough recent race experience under their belt, because that's very relevant leading up to a big competition. But how do you manage? So you mentioned the word safely a second ago, and I was a competitive whitewater kayaker personally before I stopped whitewater kayaking and took up coaching. And so in whitewater kayaking, you're hurtling down a whitewater river with large rapids, rocks, water, obstacles, and you're going far faster than most people would believe is sensible. And obviously that's a bit like driving a Ferrari on ice on occasions, if you accelerate too hard. How do you manage your training in that environment where a mistake could be bone breaking? How do you manage that to stay safe while still pushing yourself?
That's a great question, because it can be really challenging. You do have to take risks. It's an inevitable part of the sport. But the truth is even when you're not taking risks, you can get injured. So, every time you get on the bike, there is a risk, and it's just a matter of limiting those risks. So for me, I have, not laid out criteria, but criteria, that I kind of go through in my head when I'm trying something new. And it's just really establishing, does this make sense? Is this within my skill set? Is this something I'm confident that I can do? And then if the answer to all of that is yes, then if I make a mistake and I get hurt, that's all it is it's a mistake. It's not because I was riding irresponsibly or recklessly or trying something I wasn't prepared for, because those things would be tough to swallow. But mistakes happen, and if I do make a mistake out on the trail, then, you know, I made a mistake doing my job, and people do that all the time.
Well, exactly. And what a job it is to have as well.
Yep. I feel very lucky.
What a job. So going backwards, you mentioned age 9 that you were there, you're playing soccer, did a race, you saw the triathlon booth. That obviously means that your parents and your family carted you around to all sorts of different events. Tell me a little bit about that, but equally, was that motivation from this, where does that motivation for competition come from? Like, are your parents super competitive? Where does it arrive from?
So I'm the only person in my family who does racing sports. So it's a very unique thing that I've picked up. My parents were both athletic. My mom, enjoyed running recreationally. My dad played football. My brother played football in college. But I was the only one who really pursued racing, as in getting to a start line. And certainly the only one who ever rode bikes or did triathlon or anything like that competitively. So it was something really unique that I stepped forth to do. My parents were remarkably encouraging. Like you said, starting at age 9, I was carted around all the way, until I went off to college. So that it's one of those things where you're a kid and you're like, oh yeah, this is so great, I'm so thankful. And then when you become an adult, you look back, you're like, whoa, I'm almost glad that I didn't know how, wow, it still blows my mind to think what they gave to be able to do that for me. So I am so incredibly grateful for those opportunities, and that they did support something that, when I told my mom I want to do triathlon, her response was, they don't have that for kids. They knew nothing. And for her to then still research it, take me to this camp, help me learn how to work on my bike so that I could do these races. It just blows my mind. So definitely major support, and probably just me being a little strange as well, that I found motivation in doing this, without someone paving the way necessarily by doing it themselves.
Well, I was going to ask, where does this racing competitive streak come from? If it's usually, with a lot of people, it comes from their parents maybe, or a significant adult in their life. Where do you think it comes from for you?
I don't know. I mean, I think for me, when I think of motivation, I think of it extremely intrinsically. I just feel so motivated by improvement, like I mentioned before. And that's how I feel in every aspect of my life. It was that way through school, I did all the normal things kids do. I did musicals and, all those things when you're younger. And it was the same thing. This just intrinsic desire to be the best that I could be. And finding a sport that felt like a limitless opportunity that's really why I think I fell in love with mountain biking, is because it just seems like the opportunity to improve is completely limitless. It's not a time on a clock where it's like, oh, I can't get that last second. It's like, okay, well, I'm not maybe improving in my sprinting this week, but oh man, I really improved the endurance. Or, oh man, I'm tired physically, but I can go out and I can still improve my skills. And so to have that ability to improve on something at all times is why I fell in love with it.
Do you think, I've met two sorts of competitive people. So one of the kayakers I coached got an Olympic gold medal, and he retired about 3 months afterwards. And I said to him, "What are you going to do now?" And he said, "Oh, I'm going to grow a beard and get fat." That was his response. And yet there's other guys I know and girls I know who've been to World Cups, World Championships, who stuck with their sport for the rest of their days. Which camp do you think you'll fall into? Are you going to be a recreational off-road biker, or without the competition, will it lose its shininess?
I'll always be a cyclist. I'll always ride my bike. To me, it's not all about the competition. It is about chasing goals, though. So I will always have a goal, no matter what that looks like. And I think that's another thing I love about the sport is racing isn't the only goal. Speed isn't the only goal. There are still routes and mountains and trails that I've yet to see and yet to conquer, and having those goals and ideas and things that I can do and places my bike can still take me, that is super motivating. So I think when that day comes, and hopefully it's still very far in the future, I will definitely not stop riding my bike. My goals will just shift and change.
Cool. And with all of this going on, so you've got the Olympics, you've obviously been a world champion. How do you manage the mental side of what you're doing? Especially I always find there's two different bits of the mental game. There's the bit before either the whistle blows or the start happens. There's that bit. And then normally there's the last third of any event when you're physically tired. You're under quite a lot of stress to keep performing, and then your head starts playing games often with you. How do you manage that inside of yourself? Is it just luck, or do you have a strategy?
For me, it is all about keeping it positive. I find that when I can think thoughts of positivity and gratitude, it's much easier to push myself. And so that is kind of the overarching theme of the whole mental game. That looks very different in the start shoot than it does coming in that 1/3. In the start shoot, those thoughts of gratitude might look more like, listing in my head the people that I know are cheering for me. It might look like objectively telling myself, these are the steps that you have done to be ready, and speaking that confidence into myself through those steps. And then towards the end of the race, it might be saying, you're doing great, you're achieving your place. Or it might be saying, you can ride this rock better. Or, just picking those parts of the course that you feel really good on. There's no point in stressing over the mistakes that you make, or if you lose a position somewhere. It's all about, this is my rock garden. This is the rock garden that I'm really good at. I can pass someone in this section of the course. And so just finding those thoughts of positivity throughout are really what drive me.
Do you use visualization at all? Do you have the course mapped out in your head to the minute detail before you start riding? Or
most definitely, yeah. I think visualization can be a huge part of mountain biking. There's a few different types of course. There are the courses that we ride blind when we do things like stage races. So by riding blind, I mean we haven't seen the course prior to racing it. And then there are courses like the World Cup courses where we're doing 7 laps in the race, and we've had 4 days to practice that lap. So in that case, visualization is huge, because you don't want to ride something, an extraordinary amount of times before the race, because you'll just fatigue yourself. So that's where, riding it a couple times really well, and then continuing to visualize yourself riding that well, can make a huge difference. And I've seen that from personal experience. There have been parts of the course that have intimidated me, and maybe I only rode it well one time before the race, but laying in bed the night before is something I can visualize myself riding it 20 times. And I've seen it work. I think visualization sometimes gets this weird, like, does it actually do anything? But I've seen it work, so I'll buy into it. I think it's definitely very helpful.
Yeah, I remember visualization didn't make any sense to me for a long period of time until I kayaked one of the hardest rapids I've ever kayaked in my entire life. And as I was going through the rapid, I knew where every paddle stroke needed to be placed with the kayak. And I knew exactly what type of paddle stroke, the infinite amount of pressure. And suddenly my mind went quiet almost, because it was like you were doing what was already programmed into your head. You didn't have to think about it. You just had to focus on staying with the program, almost like sticking with the speed, sticking with the placement. And I think that's that comes from visualization. I don't think it comes from anywhere else.
Yeah. And I think, the other place that I'll practice visualization is just in visualizing myself feeling the way I want to feel. So one of the ways that I've actually visualized that is I do get very nervous before races. I think everyone does, but I used to get really nervous before races. And so I spend a lot of time visualizing myself on the start line, literally just visualizing myself standing there, feeling calm, feeling confident, feeling ready. And it's made a world of difference for me.
Yeah, because if you start off with that in mind and that's how you actually feel, the rest becomes much, much simpler, doesn't it?
Most definitely.
Yeah, otherwise, I can remember a competition, one of my first competitions I did, my heart was racing, my mouth was dry, my brain was fried. I just couldn't, I think I probably realized about 30-40% of my real potential. So what's your favorite riding location at the moment? Do you have one? Like if I said, it can be anywhere in the world, by the way, I said, Hannah, you can go here tomorrow and go and ride your bike. Where would it be?
Oh my gosh. Wow. Well, I'm really tempted to maybe pick a place that I've never ridden before, because that's something that I love. Is I love travel and I love riding my bike in new places. But for the sake of the podcast, I'm not just going to throw out a place, because I know people always like, what, you've never been there? That's no good.
I tell you what, you could throw out something on like your bucket list of a place you'd like to go, and then somewhere that you've been that you'd like to go again, maybe.
Okay. I think I'd really love to ride my bike in Greece. I've heard really great things of Greece and Turkey. I have raced in Switzerland, but I raced a World Cup there. So it was just in Lenzerheide, a very small course. And I'd love to really explore, maybe do something like the Swiss Epic one day. So those are my big picture, the places I'd love to go that I've heard absolutely amazing things about. In terms of places that I love riding, right now is I'm still in the honeymoon phase with Utah, because I've only lived here 2 years, but I love Utah. I love Moab. I love riding my bike in Park City. I just think Utah has a really a unique terrain of variety of trails. They have the flowy type, high alpine, loamy. They also have really dry and dusty. And then, you can go to Moab and you can ride the whole Enchilada, which is my favorite trail in the world. And you can ride all of those things in one go, in one descent. So, yeah.
Tell me about that trail, the full Enchilada. Your face just lit up the moment you mentioned it. Why is it so special?
Yeah, the whole Enchilada is a trail located in Moab, Utah, and so it's renowned as a downhill trail, meaning it's a descent. You can ride up it. It's a very, very long, hard, single track climb to the top, and it tops out above tree line. So you're going to drop in above tree line, really high elevation. I think it's something like 12,000 feet.
Wow.
And you're going to descend, and it starts really steep, kind of loamy type of trail. It goes through more desert type of like small drops, and then ends up on this really rocky ridge line with these huge views. And it just has a little bit of everything. And when it's all said and done, the descent takes you know, for a professional rider, it takes well over 2 hours going downhill, which is a pretty long descent. So
what
it's
altitude
really
do you finish at? If you start at like 11,000 feet, you must be finishing at like 4,000 feet or something.
Mm-hmm. Yep, right around 4. Mm-hmm.
That's incredible. So for the recreational rider, that's a big day out, really. If it takes somebody who's a pro 2 hours, the recreational rider must be like 4 or 5 hours.
Yeah, it is a huge day, and it's really well ridden. Like, you know, thousands and thousands of tourists come every year. There's big shuttle companies that'll drive people up to the top and drop them off, and it is an all-day adventure, but it's really fun to see these big groups of people out there tackling it. And just watching how everyone chooses to ride it, whether you're walking some sections, whether you're, you know, racing your own time, whether you're just having a great time. It's just another example of the fact that the mountain bike serves so many different purposes for so many different people.
That's phenomenal, isn't it? Whether you want to ride it to the pub for a pint of beer or go down the full enchilada, there's something for everybody.
Yeah.
Do you get to ride? Do you ride for fun these days without any competition or goals? Just like go down a downhill route just because it's there and it looks good, or is everything Olympics focused, competition focused?
A little bit of both. I mean, it's funny because my friends will give me a hard time about that, because for me, the numbers are really fun. So I love analyzing the numbers and looking at the numbers, and I love being focused on the goals. So that is part of the fun for me. But it is really important to put those away sometimes, whether or not I like that. I think it is important. And so there is that, you know, 5% of the time that you just have to let go of everything and you know, ride with some friends and just put it all away and remember, you know, we're just so lucky to be riding our bike, period. Nothing else added, just we're lucky to be riding our bikes.
That's very true. And I guess a lot of your friends are of a similar character to you. They compete and they train and they're pretty handy on a bike. So it's not like you're out cycling with me.
I'm sure we'd have fun too.
I aim to have fun doing no matter everything that I do. Now, I don't have much mountain biking experience, if I'm to be honest. But what I do have is this experience that for every hour I spend on my bike, I normally spend 30 to 45 minutes afterwards fixing it. Is that something that you find the same? Do you have to do it yourself? Do you have a person who fixes your bike for you? What's the score as a pro mountain biker?
Well, the good news is the nicer the equipment that you get, the less you will have to work on it. So I can't relate to that same ratio that you might be experiencing.
So I have to suck it up and spend more money on a bike. Is that what you're saying?
Potentially. But you know, it is a sport that requires some maintenance. And you know, there's give and take. You know, I have really great equipment and really great sponsors, so things aren't breaking. But I'm also a professional, so it's my job to make sure that everything is perfect. So the time that I might not be spending fixing something, instead I might be spending time dialing in the pressure in my suspension or fine tuning something rather. So there is a lot of time that you spend on the bike, on the machine that you're using as well. I have wonderful mechanics for that. So I try as best as I can to educate myself and make sure that I have the knowledge I need to execute what I need to on the trail. But at the races, my team has a mechanic, and I'm fortunate enough that my fiance is a extremely good mechanic as well. So I have help 24/7.
That's perfect. And
yes.
can you measure all of those different things, like how much pressure the brake will give, or how the pressure of the suspension? Is that measured stuff, or is that stuff that you feel as you're riding it and then you increase or decrease depending upon the feel?
A little bit of both. I mean, there are tactics that you can take, especially with the suspension, to, measure exactly how much rebound you're having. Of course, like in the most simplest terms, there's an O-ring, so you can see how much you're bottoming out. But over time, it really is mostly a feeling. And to anyone who's struggling with that type of thing, like I hear a lot of the time, tire pressure is a huge question, because that makes a really big difference on the trails. And it's so hard to know where to start. So I always recommend going to the absolute extremes, run very, very, very low tire pressure, and then pump it up and run really, really high tire pressure so that you can feel the vast difference, and then slowly start to narrow it in, because at first you're not going to feel a difference between 1 PSI. But as you kind of get it closer and narrow it down and learn what you're looking for, you'll become more and more sensitive to those things.
And I guess some of that stuff will change based upon altitude. I mean, 11,000 feet has a very different feel in pressure to 4,000 feet.
Yeah, and that's where you can get really nerdy, is with altitude or changing it according to the temperature and all of those type of things. So it's like I said, mountain biking is a sport for all types of people, whether you love the technical terrain, whether you love the fitness, or whether you love like literally the mechanics of the bicycle. It has so many facets to it.
It's incredible. So what does a typical day look like for you at the moment? People, you've mentioned things already, like you need to, if you're competing, you need to rest, you need to, so that you can recover and train well enough. You obviously need to eat, you need to hydrate, you need to do some training. What does your day look like?
Yeah. A typical day, it does change because the training changes. So that can be a tricky one, is people always want to know what's the typical day. And
what about like a typical day for now? 12 months to the Olympics. How does a typical day look for you at the moment?
Yeah. So, I take sleep really seriously. So I normally wake up probably around 7 right now, because it's really hot, and I just eat breakfast and get ready to ride right away. So I'm going to do, my normal, I do some kind of activation exercises before I get on the bike. And I'm usually on the bike about an hour and a half after I wake up. I ride anywhere from, on average, probably 3 to 4 hours would be somewhere around the average. Could be as much as 6. If it's a recovery day, that's a totally different story. Then it might be, 1. But on average, then I'll go ride for 3 to 4 hours. When I get back, I'll immediately have some sort of recovery drink, lunch, get some sort of protein in within 30 minutes. And then I usually take a nap, just a really quick nap, to try and kind of expedite that recovery. And then I will wake up, stretch, foam roll, do whatever type of those recovery things. I love like the recovery boots, putting on the Normatec boots. And then once I've done all of that is when I start my more, I coach quite a few athletes. And so at that point, I'll be sitting down, analyzing their workouts, writing their workouts for the next day.
And those athletes are mountain bikers as well?
Endurance athletes. So I coach any variety of cycling, triathlon, and endurance running.
Wow, it's a busy day, hey?
Yeah, in college, I have a degree in exercise science, and I have another degree in athletic training. And those are some things that I really love and I'm really passionate about. And I couldn't give it up. So that's my way of really enjoying that passion and getting to continue to pursue that.
Fit it in. And do you end up doing quite a lot of off the bike training, sort of getting in the gym, running to get those legs working differently? What's the cross training or off the bike training look like for you?
So I would normally go to the gym usually 2 to 3 times a week in the off season, and then 1 to 2 times a week in the race season. Right now, with everything going on, I'm not going into the gym, but I'm still doing at home strength workouts with like a TRX and a Swiss ball and whatever weights I have around the house. So I'm doing that about twice a week right now as well.
Cool. Jeepers. I take my hat off to you. I'm the dyslexic version of fit, which is fat. Just swap the I and the A around. Lockdown and coronavirus has not been good for me. So I've got the same question, but two different audiences to ask the question about. And the first question is, so it's about what advice you'd give. But what advice would you give to the 18, 19 or 20-year-old version of you who is, they're competitive, they're doing amazingly well in a sport, they've got their sights set on bigger things. What do you wish somebody had told you back then that would have helped you out or made your route to where you are now easier?
Yeah, there's a few ways I could go on that question. The first way is, have patience and stay the course. And I think that that's what I've done. And that is something that has really rewarded me. My coach has said, I've been working with my coach for over 5 years. So since I transitioned to mountain biking, he's the only coach I've had for mountain biking. And he's always said, honor the process. And it's such a simple thing, but it has held true my entire career. So, I think that's a really big piece of advice is honor the process. And I think that's really valuable for a lot of people because it's hard. You want to see progress right away and you want to see it now and you want to see it comparing yourself to others. But sometimes it's taking a step back and looking at the big picture. The other way that I would go on that advice is to remember that when you're young, not everything's the world championship. And that can be really hard to digest. And that's something where when people say what's something you could have told yourself or would want to tell yourself is, I remember, even in triathlon at 12 years old, standing on some of those national championship start lines, just feeling like, and this is the race that will change my career. And it's funny, I'm glad that I had that extreme desire and that extreme drive. And I think it did help me. But I think it's also so important to just there is no single race that is going to change your life. It's going to be the whole career laid out. And I think especially when you're young, it's really important to remove some of that pressure from yourself and to remember you have hundreds of opportunities ahead of you if you want them.
And it's interesting, in my experience, the thing that gives you the opportunity is rarely the thing that you think will give you the opportunity. So you think this will be the race, and it never, ever is. It's often a race you've done badly in that actually gives you the opportunity you've been waiting for. It's a weird way the world works.
Yeah.
So a similar sort of question now, but also then thinking it to the recreational mountain bikers, the guys and girls who get out in their evenings and weekends, and maybe they race or maybe they just want to go off-road biking for stress relief, but they want to be a little bit better. What are some of the sort of common things that maybe people miss on their route to being better that maybe they could focus some more time and effort and energy on?
I mean, the very obvious answer is just to practice. That's the biggest one that sometimes does get missed because that mentality of, you're either good or you're not. And that's definitely not true. It takes time and especially on the mountain bike, the fitness isn't always reflected. You can go out and you can be super, super fit, but if you're shifting at the wrong moment, you're going to be expending a lot more energy. So I think that patience and that practice is obviously huge. But the big thing I would say would be to take your bike off the trail and to practice the very basics. If this is something that you really want to improve on, And you really want to feel good about it. It's not about being fast, it's about feeling confident. And one of the ways that I've found that confidence is by taking my bike off of the trail to somewhere like a park, just a big grassy area where I feel really, really safe, and practicing everything from, just your balance on the bike, standing, seeing how you feel when you move your weight forward, when you move your weight backwards, to, just playing and doing wheelies and things like that. It transfers directly to the trail. It really, really does. It's super fun to do. It's a no pressure situation, and you will see results from that, I think, pretty much immediately.
So you've mentioned balance as one of the basics, and wheelies. What other basics are there that people should be thinking about practicing to get themselves better on their bikes, or like maybe some drills or some things? I don't know, anything.
Yeah. For me, like I said, I like to practice balance. And like I mentioned with the tire pressure before, it's all about the extremes to find what feels good. So, a great warm up is just getting on your bike and bringing your hips and your body all the way up against the handlebars, and then all the way back behind the saddle, getting as low as you can, getting as high as you can, just feeling all of those different things. And once you've felt it all, find the middle, just spend some time moving around, finding that middle where you're balanced. So that's, a simple one. Track standing. So seeing, if you can balance in one place without moving forward on the bike, that's a great place to find balance. Cornering is a huge one. So I'll set up cones. I'll set up really, really tight cones and do little figure eights around them. I'll also set up cones far apart and sprint in and kind of do a slalom type of course, and practicing the proper technique. So outside foot down, looking through the corners, leaning the bike, and in that situation, since it's so easy to go back and do those corners again, you can focus on one thing each time, rather than on the trail. A lot of the time it's like, oh, I have this one corner to do, I don't know what to think about, oh my gosh, the corner's gone. But when it's right there and you can do it so many times, it's like, okay, this time I'm going to focus on just what my right foot is doing. And you can kind of go through your whole body in that way.
Cool. I always advise people to find safe ways of putting their bike and their body, or in my case, their boat and their body, in really obscure positions, like abnormal, because at some point in time you will end up in an abnormal situation, like where your bike and in your case, the bike and the body are at a weird place and angle. And unless you're used to recentering yourself again quickly, people panic because suddenly everything's not as it should be. And that's what I love, like wheelies, anything that people can do in any sport I don't know I think the words contextually interfere with what it is that they're doing, so that one time where they end up flying through the air and the wheels on your bike, for instance, are like shifting off to the left and your body's going to the right, you actually know how to go and bring it back and make sure that the wheels hit the ground when you land before the body does, because one's far less painful.
Yeah.
Awesome. So obviously the Olympics is coming up for you next year. Let's just be positive and say it's coming up for you next year. But away from the Olympics, what next is there? Do you want on your bucket list for mountain biking? Are there other competitions, other trails? What next?
Yeah. So I'm on the Orange Seal off-road team. And one of the really cool things about that team is that we do a big variety of racing. And there's a lot of support on the team surrounding all those different types. And that's something I love. I couldn't imagine ever just riding my bike in one context. So while Orange Seal is supporting me trying to get to the Olympics, they're also supporting me in gravel racing. I'm doing, the Pro XCT style, Olympic style races, of course, domestically and internationally. I'm doing marathon style races, so 4 or 5 hour races. I'm doing stage races. So there's more races than I could ever fit into the calendar. And so I'm really excited and looking forward to that next year, because obviously we got a little cut short this year.
Wow. How do you choose what to do and what not to do? Because in my experience, you could fill every day of every weekend up with races without even thinking about it. How do you choose what to do and what not to do?
It's a huge challenge. It's so hard. I mean, a lot of it has to do with, so as a team and as an individual, we pick our main goals. So, in 2021, with the Olympics being a big goal, one of the first things we'll do is, we'll put the Olympics down and say, okay, well, what would it take to get there? And then we'll fill in the races before that, and the Olympics being in July, then you still have the whole rest of the season after that. So, maybe we'll pick a big race later in the season that's, maybe a really big gravel race or a really big marathon race. And then we'll fill in the races leading up to that. And so everything's kind of centering around these big goals, both individually as a team. We have a lot of great sponsors who we can also integrate throughout that process as well.
Jeepers. I bet it keeps you very, very busy. So I want to give you the opportunity, and I did brief you about this about an hour ago, to have a bit of a rant about anything you like to do with biking, mountain biking, competitive sport. It can be a rant around something you wish people did less of or something you wish people did more of. But I just want to hand the mic over to you, and you can have your say on any topic you please for any length of time.
Okay. I feel like this is like such a dangerous thing that you do on the podcast, both for your podcast and for the person on it. Like it's risky. So if I'm going to rant about something, it has to be about trail usage. And by that, I just mean we have such remarkable trails that we all have access to. And I think that is something so amazing about the sport. The fact that we can all be, hikers can be on the trail at the same time as riders, at the same time as, amateurs. And I can be out there as a 5-year-old's also out there. There are Olympians, there are pros, there's everyone out on these trails. And that is really rare in sport. You don't often get into the pool with Michael Phelps, right? But you can be out on the trail and have an Olympian pass you and you might not even know. So I think that's something really, really cool that we get to have in our sport. Yet for some reason on the trails, I feel like there's often this sense of separation. And that's the thing that can drive me crazy is I want to enjoy the trails with you. So let's enjoy them together. And I think the way that we do that is through communication. And communication can get really rough out on the trail sometimes. And I would just say, I think it's really important that everyone, first of all, communicate. There's nothing that drives me crazier than when people won't open their mouths. Hey, how are you? Silence. Come on, you're outside, you're enjoying it, right? Let's enjoy it together. And then just communicating what each other need. I know that sometimes there are really rough situations, but personally, if I'm asking to pass and you say, hey, I don't feel safe right now, I'll let you go by in a minute. Awesome. Perfect. Love it. So I think just my rant would be on let's all communicate, because my deepest desire is to share the trails with everybody. And when people don't communicate that and prefer to go in silence or to immediately escalate to frustration, that makes me sad more than anything, because I just want the outdoors to be a space of total stoke.
Awesome. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. And you're obviously there. You're also talking about, and I've seen this in other sports, about the egos involved with people. I've seen it skiing and snowboarding. And I can just imagine some guys feeling really like their ego being threatened, that there's this girl in her mid-20s who's got all the shiny kit, who's just about to fly past them, and they're going to spend 3 hours getting to the bottom, and they know she'll only spend another 45 minutes.
Well, I wasn't going to say it, but since you did, I can just nod in agreement.
Yeah, no, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. I've got big enough shoulders to cope with any negative comments that come back my way. Yeah, and it's hard as well, because when you end up with groups of people who've got matching kit on, they're obviously sponsored. Often that's quite alienating. It's a very, very weird, very, very weird environment to be for amateurs and professionals alike. And yet there still is space to cohabit and to have a great time together.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important thing to note, especially right now. The outdoor industry is one industry that has seen a huge boom throughout this otherwise really difficult time. More people are out on trails than ever before. And as a community, like as someone who has made their career out of being outside, that makes me very excited. And I hope it makes everyone excited. And so I think it's that mutual agreement that, there needs to be communication, but on both sides. So when I see people that I can easily identify as new, it's my job to stop and make sure, if I'm struggling past them, do they feel safe? If they have a flat, do they know how to fix it? Do they know what they need? Do they know where they're going? Are they lost? I just think that, like you said, it's just such a unique situation where so many different abilities and goals intertwine, and we can all help each other see the beauty in that.
I used to have conversations with young up-and-coming whitewater kayakers who got to train. They could train 7 days a week if they wanted to. And so we used to have a conversation about the difference between weekends and weekday evenings and weekday daytimes. Because weekday daytimes, there's rarely anybody else about. You can go hell for leather and you have very little to consider other than yourself and your people you're with. But then evenings and weekends, I was very much like, this is time to slow down. It's time to work on skill and technical ability, but also to be the role model for the rest of the sport, to leave a legacy behind. And I think that's missed by some, but doesn't sound by like your coach, but by some coaches miss that, and they let their athletes at the weekends go and treat it like 10 o'clock on a Tuesday morning, even though there's now 1,000 people on the trail, whereas on Tuesday morning there's only ever 10. I think it's so important.
Absolutely. I completely agree with that. There are some trails that I feel like on the weekend, they just don't belong to me during that time. I can go to different trails that aren't as heavily trafficked because I've probably already seen that trail 5 times that week.
So lucky. Hannah, I just want to take a minute to say thank you to you. I want to thank you for being a role model for other young females who are coming up. They don't quite know what they're going to do and where they're going to go to, but they know that it's not going to be a linear route. They can start off playing soccer, they can do triathlon, and ultimately they can end up representing the US on a mountain bike. And you may not be aware of what you do and what you offer, but other people hold you up in very high esteem. And they're like, if she can do it, I can do it. And so without people like you in the world, none of the rest of us know what's possible. So thank you so much for what you do.
Thank you. Those are really, really kind words. I really appreciate that.
That's cool. So that's it from me. Hannah, if people want to find you, communicate with you, follow your adventures, where's best for them to go and engage with you?
You can follow me on Instagram. My handle is @Hannah_Finchamp. So that is my first and last name, HANNAH_Finchamp, FIN CHAMP. And you can also follow my blog where I post training tips. And that's the same thing, www.hannahfinchamp.com.
Perfect. Let's see. We'll get some more bikers go and learn some stuff off you. Hannah, thank you so much. And I look forward to hanging out with you again very soon.
Thank you.